Well, I can tell you, NEBOSH students, that auditing is not my favourite topic, and yet NEBOSH do like to ask exam questions on auditing. And here's a common type of question. Let's take a look. Comment on the health and safety advisor's approach to the audit. Now, this is actually a very, very easy type of question, and this approach I'm going to set out here works on a lot of different questions. You might get a question that says, comment on this, comment on their permit to work system, comment on their emergency procedures, comment on whether they did this well or that well or badly or whatever, comment on their selection of contractors. All you have to do is go to your course materials and look at how should the audit take place? Or if it's a contractor question, how should contractors be managed? How should they be selected? For this question, look at how an audit should take place and then contrast that with what happens in the scenario. And your comment is basically just pointing out what the auditor did well or what the auditor did badly. Now, to be fair, NEBOSH can change this question slightly. They could ask you to focus on the positive aspects of their approach, or they could ask you about the negative aspects of their approach. So they could say, what was positive, and they would normally write that in italics, what was positive about the H&S advisor's approach to the audit? They could ask you something like that, or they could ask you something about the negatives as well. So make sure you read the question very carefully to know whether it's positive or negative, or whether in this case it's just a mixture of the two. It's neither positive nor negative. Just give us your opinion on their approach to the audit. So what I like to do first is go to the course materials, because the course materials are going to tell me what a good audit looks like. So let's go to the table of contents. And if you've studied the course, you will know audit is in element 4. And we'll go down here and we've got health and safety auditing. There it is. So we'll click there. Got a bit of theory, like what is an audit, why do we do them, and so on, difference between audits and inspections, blah, 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 blah. Where is it? Where's the bit I need? There it is, audit stages. This is how we do an audit. So we do some pre-audit prep, notification, timetable, gather information, book interviews. We do the audit, feedback on findings, close out actions. If you're watching this and you're a NEBOSH student, did you know that you have a ton of resources on the Compassa website which you can use? Many of them are very, very cheap. You've got our YouTube section here, loads of free advice here. But if you want some study books, if you want exam technique documents, exam technique guides, instructions on how to do your NG2 or IG2 practical project, you can download those at some very, very reasonable prices from our website. And if you wanted hands-on tutor support with full access to all of our tutorials, guides, me and my colleagues at the tips of your fingers, consider signing up for our NEBOSH Rescue package. You'll get access to our full course and tutor support at a heavily discounted rate. And, well, frankly, you'll struggle to find pass rates that are as consistently high anywhere else. Let's get back to the advice. Now, there's a lot of detail behind this, so we scroll down, a bit more detail, bit of notification, there's a timetable. Pre-audit prep will include things like, what are we auditing? What's the scope? We have to decide what the scope is. Is the scope right? Is the scope bad? Who's going to do the audit? Are they competent? We gather information. We're going to book interviews in advance. We're going to create a checklist of questions, things that we're going to look at, things we're going to ask. Most importantly, we're going to agree what standard we're auditing against. What does good look like? What are we going to compare reality against? We need a standard. How long is it going to take? What resources? How are we going to feed back the findings? So that's the prep. And then we have things like the information gathering, like what documents, policies, procedures, records, risk assessments. Do we do a tour of the site? Do we interview people? Are we interviewing a variety of people? We've got formal interviews. And we've got junior people, senior people, and so on. And then once we've collected the information, we analyze it, we get some trends, some stats, and then we write a report. And the report will have things like findings, conclusions, recommendations, action plans, priorities, that gets shared, and so on. So loads of stuff in there about how do we do a good audit. Your job, hopefully you've studied that, and hopefully you can now recognize in the scenario where they do that or where they don't do that. And then you can write it all out. So let's take a look at the scenario. Hey, sorry to interrupt the video. I hope you're finding this useful. If you want more information, we've got loads of free information on our YouTube channel. If you go into our channel playlists, you'll find a whole playlist called the 12 Steps to Smashing Your NG1, IG1 NEBOSH Exam. And it'll go through the 12-step process that our students follow to get some of the highest pass rates in the NEBOSH e-learning industry. If you would like even more help, then you can head over to our website, compassa.co.uk, click on NEBOSH Exam Help and you'll also find study books that you can download for both the national and international general certificates. And without further ado, let's get back into it. So let's go straight in. We've got the company conducts a general health and safety audit twice a year. A newly appointed health and safety advisor 2 months into the role was asked to complete the latest internal audit. They were briefed by the operations manager to have the report ready in time for the quarterly management meeting scheduled for the following week. My goodness, not got a lot of time here, have they? Not got a lot of time. They're going to have to rush this. The advisor reviewed previous audits briefly. So very briefly, they looked at the past audits to see what was highlighted. Then they adapted a checklist which they had used in a former role. So they've recycled something which might not be completely appropriate. They've had to adapt it. And they focused the audit on general housekeeping, fire safety and PPE. They did not include maintenance activities or contractor control this time, as they considered these lower risk and intended to review them separately. Ooh, okay. Well, I would say those things are high risk. They're not lower risk. Maintenance and contractor control are not lower risk. They should definitely be included. Audit activity took place over 2 afternoons. Not a very long time, but it might be okay. The advisor moved between departments, informally engaging with employees who were available. Informally engaging with employees who were available and making notes of their observations. Good practices were noted during the walkaround. So there is a walkaround. That's positive. And where minor issues were identified, such as an obstructed exit route, the advisor mentioned them directly to the supervisor on duty. Well, that's positive. All right, so there is a walk around. They spotted good things, they spotted bad things, they've raised the bad thing. They've reviewed a selection of risk assessments and inspection records on the shared drive. They did not request additional documentation, preferring to keep things light given operational pressures. If we go on down here, it's kind of interesting that the advisor produced a short summary report outlining observations and a few suggested improvements. The report was emailed to the ops manager for discussion at a review meeting. The operations manager read the audit report and emailed the advisor back, asking whether the result was positive or negative, along with what action needed to be taken next. So it's not telling us what's good or bad. It's just kind of telling us a bit of a story, and we now need to compare that with what's in our course materials. So one of the things that I've observed straight away, because I'm going to kind of start at the beginning, the pre-audit prep, I'm going to start with the scope of the audit. The scope of the audit has been decided, and that's good. But the bad thing is the scope is not very good. The scope excluded maintenance activities and contractor control. Anyway, let's write about that. Let's say, and we're going to use a numbered bullet point because I find those helpful to help me count how many answers I've made. I'll say the audit scope has been decided, which is good, but the advisor failed to include contractor control and maintenance because they deemed these lower risk. These are not lower risk and should have been included. There we are. So I have given my opinion, because that's what comment means. I've given my opinion on that particular thing, and I've backed it up with relevant information from the scenario. Next, they have briefly reviewed the previous audits. Okay, they have briefly reviewed previous audits, which is a good start, but the review should not be brief. They should thoroughly prepare by reviewing all of the necessary documentation. And just while we're talking about documentation, like there was a bit mentioned a little bit later, wasn't it, about the documentation. They reviewed the risk assessments and inspection records, but they didn't review anything else. Normally you would look at things like the health and safety policy and some of the procedures on this. They failed to review the health and safety policy and procedures, partly because they were in a rush to get the audit done by next week. All right, what else can we say? The advisor did do a walk around and spotted some issues, but they failed to interview people formally, and they've only interviewed employees. They haven't looked at supervisors or managers or directors or anyone else. So there's a bit to say there. One positive is they did a walk around and observed activities, so they could see work in practice. Another positive is they observed both good and bad practices, and they reported an urgent issue like the blocked exit route immediately. A negative is that they failed to formally interview anyone. relying on informal conversations with workers who were available. They also failed to speak with anyone more senior, like managers or people in support functions, and that's not good. So can you kind of see how we're just comparing like how it should have been done with what really happened, and we're just pointing out, well, they did do that and that's great, and they didn't do that and that's bad. And that's basically how you answer that type of question. And this, in this case, is a 10-mark question, so I would expect to see, you know, at least 10 comments. You want to see 12, 13, 14, 15 comments maybe, to try and guarantee that you get, get those top marks. Try and get all of the marks on this. It's a very easy question. And just work your way through the scenario, like I've done there, just making those little comments. That's all. Very, very easy question. I hope you found that super useful. Please take some time to look at the other videos on our YouTube channel. Got loads of videos explaining how to do NG1, NG2. It's all free. It's YouTube, isn't it? It's just free. Just sit through the damn adverts. And well, if you've got any questions, please drop them in the comments box below.